All right, it's time for another Reddit reply. I'm always excited for this. And now that we have new content, there's more questions, there are more comments, there are more people getting into the game, which is really cool to see. If you ever have any questions you want answered, you can either put in the comments down below or ask live at twitch.tv/D20 Woodworking, where I live stream. Make sure to turn on or hit follow and turn on the notifications so you know when I go live. But let's dive into Reddit. All right, the first one is this game makes a fantastic first impression. This is very likely a common thought, but after playing my first game of Marvel Champions, I'm blown away by how much fun I had. It truly makes a fantastic impression. Mechanically speaking, the rules are very straightforward and not complex. Oh, my sweet summer child. Wait till you learn about the rule of you. You will be confused. Or maybe you won't. Maybe something else of yours will be. But not your ally, but sometimes your ally. You'll understand later. The gameplay loop is simple to grasp, but quite elegant with enough complexity to not be boring. My first game was a was playing two-handed with Doctor Strange, Iron Man against Rhino. The gameplay difference of both characters was quite compelling, and each character truly felt unique, which is one of the really cool things about this, even with like the new heroes. And one thing I always harp on is how unique does the hero feel? That's what I've always cared about. And same with villains too. I always care about the uniqueness, not necessarily like how strong they are, but unique is good, and they've done a really good job with this game overall. So they talk about with Iron Man and whatnot. They took their time on stage one, making sure I fully understand the rules. And although I made a few mistakes, we all do, so don't worry about that. Being deliberate at the start of the game, at the start, gave me a greater appreciation for the gameplay. By the end, I feel like I had a loop down that was pretty much that played much faster with less mistakes. Good game design. Yeah. So they kind of talk about other things that was happening mechanically speaking, but they could see it kind of play out. It's always cool to see new people kind of getting into this game. I assume this person's new, but seeing new people get into the game and enjoying it. I mean, there is more and more stories like this constantly. Like it was always kind of a thought that I don't know Marvel Champions popularity would be increasing or decreasing or being stagnant. It seems to be continuing to increase, which is really cool to see. So really awesome. All right, so this one's terrible, but someone shared this picture and they just finished organizing their cards and it fell down the steps. This is like my worst nightmare. Like all my cards are stored upstairs and I walk downstairs into the basement to do these streams and these recordings and whatnot. And like I am so cautious with that box and I make sure that nothing happens. So this is just terrible. I feel terrible for this person, but I had to show this image. It literally pains me. I didn't know an image could bring this much pain to me, but it's a lot. All right, the next one is about a question about Gambit's throw D card ability. How will throw D card trigger once one with 1/1 card? Example, you play the card and use three counters instead of dealing 2 damage. With the first one be 5 damage, and then when the minion is defeated, you still deal 5 damage to the enemy after that, or just 2? Will it be like a baby royal flush, yay or nay? So they have a picture of Gambit, which shows the counters on it. When you play an attack event, remove up to 3 charge counters from here. That event deals +1 damage for each counter removed. And then 1/1 states deal 2 damage to an enemy. If this attack defeats that enemy, deal 2 damage to an enemy. It does 3 onto each of those, so that actually be a 5/5 card. So it is a really strong card. It's really really good card as long as you defeat an enemy. Well, not even as long as, I mean, still 1 for 5 is still pretty darn good. But 1 for 5 and 5 is even better, obviously. But yeah, that is how that works. It would affect everything on that card, not just the first one or just the second one. It would do both of them. All right, the next one is love the buildup and mostly dislike events. I've been trying to figure out why Nova, Gamora, and other event-based heroes are falling flat for me, and I think I'm not just a fan of events. I love the buildup, might be why I like Rogue so much. I'll play them, but will almost always toss them to pay for an upgrade or support card if I can. Anyone else find events to just be unsatisfying to play? It's actually kind of interesting because I am the exact opposite. I actually enjoy playing events more than the buildup. Like I recognize that buildup is important and I should probably like spend money on it, but it feels like I'm not making progress toward what I want to do. And obviously building up is important. It's very, very good. It's a very strong way to play. It's probably the better way to play. But I've always enjoyed playing events more because it feels like I'm doing something. Maybe because I just want instant gratification and I don't want to like spend the money on a resource that like, yes, it'll pay off in the long term. Like I want it to happen now. But it's really kind of interesting how people differ on this, that some people really like event-based heroes like Gamora and Nova. I absolutely love those heroes. Huge build out heroes like Iron Man, like I'm just not as excited for. So it's kind of interesting, but I'm really happy that they have both those options for players so that you can do it however you want. But let me know down in the comments. Are you an event type builder or event type player, or are you a builder? What are the most suitable aspects for each core set hero? A new player here. I've played a few rounds and I'm getting a feel for the game and the different aspects, strengths, and weaknesses. I knew the conversation changes as your collection expands, but I've been wondering, putting aside the recommended starter decks in the box, what aspect would you say is best for each hero if you only have core set cards? This is kind of tough with just core set cards. I would say for Spider-Man, I still like him in Justice, and maybe it's because like I'm having such a hard time remembering exactly what core is, but I think they recommend Justice too in the core box for Spider-Man. But Protection makes a lot of sense for Spider-Man as well, like leaning into his strength with his 3 defense. I get it. I don't know. I still like him in Justice more. Past that is what She-Hulk is also there. I think She-Hulk works really well in Justice as well, and this is also from a solo perspective. But she works really well because you want to flip down with her. Like I feel like a lot of people didn't appreciate She-Hulk early on because of how much flipping there is, and a lot of us were playing true solo early on, so flipping wasn't great back in the day. But yeah, I think She-Hulk can actually work really well in aggression as well. But yeah, I think Justice or Aggression works pretty strong. What else do we have then? We have Black Panther, who I like a lot in Protection because you already have Retaliate, so you might as well just lean into that. Now you can make him work in other aspects too, and Black Panther is really well done and is very well rounded. But I actually like him in Protection. I think it makes a lot of sense, even though Protection is pretty weak early on, but that's not here, there, nor there. Then we have Captain Marvel, right? Who I think makes the most sense in leadership. She's very, very strong, works in aggression as well. But Captain Marvel is personally, I like in leadership a lot. And then I don't remember the last one. What's the last one? Iron Man. That's why I don't remember. Iron Man is weird in the beginning. Iron Man makes a lot of sense later on in Protection, but I aggression makes more sense, I think, for him. Um, Justice makes a lot of sense. People have done leadership. I don't think it makes as much sense. It's kind of weird with just the core set. Like what they recommend is almost kind of what's best for them. It feels like, but they change so much as you get more cards, and this is what makes it kind of hard because I don't fully remember what's in the core box just by itself. But I would mess around with each one. But as far as what's best, Protection overall was really, really, really weak with the core box. Justice was pretty good with for true solo. Aggression was kind of there, and leadership was generally speaking the strongest aspect, like the first cycle. So, yeah, take that for what it is. All right, next one is looking for clarification on Mysterio. Mysterio makes it so you draw or discard an encounter card from the player deck. You would deal that card to yourself as a face down encounter card, then you draw a card. How this interacts with drawing seems pretty straightforward. If you play a drop kick with a kicker cost, and then the top card of your deck is an encounter card, you would deal 4 damage, stun a target, and deal yourself an encounter card to yourself. Draw 1 additional card from your deck, and then you're done. Okay. If there are 2, then you would do it again, right? My question is how this interaction with a how this effect interacts with abilities that discard cards from the deck. As for example, Iron Man's Repulsor Blast wants you to discard 5 cards on top of your deck and count the energy resources. Let's say you play this card and in your top 5 there are 4 player cards and 1 encounter card. Which of the following would be true? So you discard the 4 player cards. When you go to discard the encounter card, you deal it and draw 1 card, then stop the effect with total 4 cards discarded and 1 drawn. Yes. Discard the 4 player cards. When you go to discard the encounter card, you deal it, draw 1 card, and then discard 1 additional player card for 5 cards discarded. Okay, now, so you would do the first one, right? You would discard the 4 player cards, and then you would discard when I think Maze of Mirrors or what it's called, you would discard the encounter card, right? Then you deal it to yourself. So it's when it's drawn or discard. So when you discard it, you deal to yourself, and then you draw a new card, right? So you draw up a 5th card and get 1 card drawn, but you would only count the 4 cards, right? So it's your first option here. This is a little weird. Like this stuff is always kind of weird, but just make sure you always, whenever the rules are saying, you just do what it says. Like this one, they're adding in extra things of drawing extra cards, it seems, because they want to discard 5 player cards. Like it doesn't say to discard 5 player cards, right? It just says discard 5 cards. So don't add extra things in there. Just do literally like what it says. Whatever the scenario says and whatever the villains, like just take it as literally as possible. The majority of the time, and you should be pretty good with the rules. Mojo Mania and Longshot. Played through this for the first time yesterday, was never able to get Longshot. When you discard cards from Mojo's Force Interrupt at the end of the player turn, does that reveal Longshot? Or you can only get them when you draw them as an encounter card? It has to be an encounter card. So when you're just discarding, you're discarding. When it comes out on the table and you turn it over, that's revealing, like you're revealing the card. Discarding and revealing are not the same, so unfortunately that does not work. Kind of stinks because Longshot isn't great in Mojo, but in other decks it like makes a lot more sense. So I actually like Longshot in some encounter sets, but Mojo Mania, because he's discarding so much of the deck, it doesn't work. This is the same with I believe Scarlet Witch too, right? You're not revealing any of the cards, you're just discarding the cards. So just take note of that, unless it says reveal. I don't think it does, but anyway, make sure if it knows is if it says reveal or discard. They are two different things. They are not the same thing. All right, question on Blockbuster. If Blockbuster already has a tough status, can I choose to give Blockbuster the tough status card, or must I choose getting +2 attack? You have to pick the one that changes the game state, right? So if they already have tough, you can't like add another tough on, so thus you can't put a tough on them, right? It'd be cool, it'd be nice because it'd be like a kind of a free ride, but no, you have to pick the other option that changes the game state overall. Do people actually play Precons? Do you guys think Precons are fun to play? I'm a casual gamer and I just want to play cards out of the box and have fun. Don't really have time to create decks for optimal play. So anecdotally, I will say that I personally will play the Precons. Let me zoom in on that a little bit. Play Precons for the YouTube videos and whatever. And those videos do well. I don't know why, but those videos do well that like showcase Precons. They actually do somewhat well compared to other videos. So I do think people want to see the Precons and how they work. And I enjoy like my time through it because generally speaking, a lot of the time Precons is kind of how they want you to play the hero. So I've always find it fascinating of like, this is what they decided to package. Like there's some thought out there that people think that like, oh, it's just a bunch of random cards they threw together. I don't think so. I don't think so. I don't know for sure. I don't know for sure. It would seem weird if it was just a bunch of random cards thrown together. I think that's how they kind of want you to like get a feel for the hero. So I usually play the precon first, but after that, I start deck building. But if you are more casual, I would suggest going to marvelcdb.com and just looking up a hero that you like and then picking your card packs and just getting decks that way. Actually, I don't know if you could pick card packs. It might be a Lord of the Rings thing only. But regardless, just looking up deck lists and then just starting there, it just makes it so much easier, especially if you're not into deck building. Missing out. First, I understand I can find great decks online and have, but realistically, I feel like most plays I'm swinging and missing on creating decks that are really fun. I still enjoy the game when I play with my decks, but there are times that when I've used quote unquote good decks and the game is just next level. Does anyone feel like they're kind of missing out when they tried their own builds? So I don't always do this. I should do this, but when I'm trying to play usually a harder scenario, what I actually do is I build a deck that I think will make the most sense, right? I think that makes sense. And I will play a game or two and I will pay attention to what cards I don't use, right? Pay attention to what you don't use and then think about what you wish you would have had. And then build from there, right? So then take out those cards that you don't have and go, oh, I wish I would have had more statuses, or I wish I would have had more healing, or whatever else, and find things that work. Or if you had issues with dealing certain things, like, oh, there's more side schemes or more minions than I remember, and I wish I had ways to deal with those things, replace it with cards that make sense for that. For me, it's very rare that I build a card out of the box that works 100% well against a villain, right? It's very rare that happens. I feel like I really have to fine tune that hero to that villain. And then if I change that villain, maybe like 70-80% of that deck will still work, but that other 20% is gonna be dead weight. And I have to figure out ways to either take out those cards or change it around or make it work. But I will say, like, deck building is like a whole subgenre. Like there's a lot to it in general. But start with your idea, start with a villain and a hero, and then, like I said, just play a game or two kind of quick. You don't have to go too crazy, and notice what you're playing and what you're not playing. You will learn from yourself what works and what doesn't work, right? Because I know a lot of times people go, oh, I don't know if this would work in a deck. Try it. And if you constantly get that card and you're not using that card, it shouldn't be in your deck then, right? Your gameplay is going to tell you what you want to use and what you don't want to use. So I would do it that way, but don't be discouraged if you think of this great idea for a deck and you play it and it doesn't work. Like, that's okay. Like, understand that most of the decks on CDB, like by like the top premier like deck builders that are very, very good at this, they're generally not just throwing a bunch of random cards together. They're throwing a bunch of random cards together, playing a lot of games with that deck against various villains, and then fine tuning it and then posting it. Like, understand that like it's not just them like throwing up cards that like hypothetically would work. At least not the top tier ones. Like most of them are over on our Discord. You can actually go talk to them. The links down below in Discord. But just understand it. They're like they are fine tuning it a lot, and they're not just throwing it together. Litmus test. My friends and I have this dive back into Marvel Champs about a 6-month hiatus. We play 3-player and tend to coordinate decently well. But I always want to play test my decks to make sure they're efficient enough to my liking. Which villain, modular, and difficulty do you all use as your playtesting base? I feel like Expert Rhino is easy, or is too easy. Expert Claw is maybe a little too tough, and I haven't played much else. I do own everything though. So I actually like Claw. Okay, it depends on how you're actually practicing too. So if you're doing it true solo, I don't think that lines up well with multiplayer, like for testing decks. Because the thing is, like, I could test a pretty good solo deck, and in multiplayer it might not make a lot of sense because I'm not helping my partner out, right? I'm not helping out the other person at the table, and I have to think about what they're using and what they're doing. So I think a part of it is you have to play test like how you're going to play. So you need to play two-handed, which makes it kind of tough in my opinion. But regardless, I generally test most of my decks against Claw on Standard. I don't even need to go against Expert because generally if I can beat Standard and I fine-tune it so it's crushing Standard, it should do well on Expert, generally speaking. That's not always the case, but generally speaking. But I think also play testing your deck as a true solo against what's going to be eventually a multiplayer is a little weird and tricky. So I've always had a hard time with that personally. Play testing decks for multiplayer. A lot of it for me is guesswork and like helping support my teammate. That's kind of how I have to do it. But anyway, as far as litmus test, that's what I use. I just use Claw. Strife's ability. Can someone please clarify what type of card case I assume card means, please? Yeah, like event, support, ally, upgrade, resource. I think those are the 5 types. But that's it. That's all it means. So if you had like 5 hand size and you have 4 events, it would count as 4. Like 4 events and 1 upgrade, which still counts like 4 when you count it up. So it's just that's what type is. Internet was right about Ronin. After months, I finally got around to doing the Guardians Most Wanted campaign. God bless you. At first, I was like, this isn't so bad. I knew the hype was wrong. I even had fun playing against Nebula. Then Ronin. I read the setup rules like 5 times because I kept thinking this couldn't be right. I never had a chance. Internet was right. Yeah. So they have changed it so that the icons on the campaign setup for Ronin are now optional. But even so, it's not great. It's not great. It is a really rough campaign. It is a really rough campaign. Even Ronin by himself is really rough. What I will say is if you're doing Ronin regularly, I've started to use Hope Summers modular set in there, and I think it makes it better because you can focus on dealing damage while Hope kind of focus on like keeping the main scheme down a little bit. It just makes it easier. And Ronin is just so tough. Like the deck is stacked against you, generally speaking. Like just make your life a little bit easier if you're playing Ronin. Now I get it, there's purists out there. I used to kind of be one of them where I was just like, no, this is what it says, this is what you do. Whatever at this point. Especially with like things like Ronin, we have so many good villains now that I don't have to try to like force myself into like playing Ronin the way that they wanted me to play him. I'll just play him however I feel like now. But yeah, suggest Hope. Hope makes things better, and add Long Shot in there too in the encounter set because that helps as well. Is there a comprehensive list of all the heroes and their archetypes? Just looking for a quick reference guide of their heroes and their type, aggression, protection. So there's archetypes and then there's aspects, right? So you're listing aspects and there's archetypes. I actually have videos on archetypes in general, archetypes in general. Maybe I'll put them up here if I remember to do it. But I have videos of general ones. I have to redo a bunch of them. So I don't think there's a quick reference, but there are videos that exist on YouTube about it. I know I have them, and I feel like Nelson has them too, and maybe some other people. But I know they do exist. So check YouTube. There's some good resources out there, not just me. Every thong feels the same. Is it just me or everything feels the same? Every hero feels the same to play. They just attack, thwart. Every card has their own gimmick, but in the end, they do the same things. Fighting villains also feels the same. They only differ in how they deliver their moves, but ultimately, it's all the same. I couldn't agree more, to be honest. I was playing a game of Wingspan, and it's really just, rolling some dice and putting some eggs down and picking up some cards. I mean, it's just like Yahtzee basically, but they added some cards to it. I mean, you're just rolling dice and putting things down and picking things up, and it's a lot like chess. I mean, in chess, I'm just picking things up and putting things down. So I get it. I get it. Pretty much everything in this game is exactly the same for sure. Really, you can expand it to books, right? Every single book I've ever read. I don't know why people read hundreds of them. I read one, and it's just letters. It's just letters that make words, that make sentences, that make paragraphs, that make pages. I mean, there is no difference in it. It doesn't matter. So I agree with this. Everything feels the same for sure. All right, Desperate Defense rules question. Sorry if this is easy info to find or is common sense, but does Desperate Defense, when your hero defends against an attack, it gets +2 for that attack. If you take no damage from that attack, ready your hero. If I have a tough status card on my hero, does stopping the damage with a tough card still trigger this card ability, readying my hero? I was leaning toward yes because the card is defense traded and thus I'm defending, but I want to double check because I've kind of fallen. Okay. So their idea is right in the sense that yes, a defense card makes you become a defender, right? So if I play a defense card, I am now defending, right? That is big for a lot of things that are upgrades like oh, I don't know off the top of my head, but Indomitable or something. I don't know. There are upgrades or whatever that you have to be defending for it to trigger. You can play a defense card and thus it will trigger. With this, though, that's kind of weird, is Desperate Defense states when your hero defends against an attack, it gets +2 for that attack. It needs to have the triggering response when your hero defends. It can't, like, the card can't self-fulfill itself, right? Because you can't play the card because you haven't defended against yourself, and using the card as defense doesn't trigger the like it doesn't work that way. So for that situation, it wouldn't work because you have to be defending in some sense. Now, if you want to get really into the weeds on this, like really into the weeds, you could actually still have this work where you could use, I brought it up, preemptive strike. You could actually use preemptive strike where when a boost card is turned face up while a villain attacks, cancel all boost icons on that card and then deal 1 damage to the villain for each boost card canceled this way. That card is a defense card. So hypothetically, if you're exhausted, right, and they turn up the boost card and you cancel it, and it deals it back with like the boost card damage, that would work. And then they would attack you with whatever their base attack line is, and it would hit your tough, it would deal no damage to you, and then you could ready up. There is a world where that situation, I guess, could happen. It'd be a crazy situation, but it could happen, especially with like, an assault or something like that. But yeah, so you have to defend, and playing a card like Preemptive Strike would make you the defender, so that would work. But again, Desperate Defense can't trigger itself. Just remember it that way. Like, you still have to do what the card says, so you have to trigger it. But yeah, it gets very complicated with a lot of this stuff with triggering and timing and stuff. And this is like one of the hardest parts of the game. But anyway, generally speaking, you have to defend. The easiest way to do that is to exhaust. But is there a situation where if you were already exhausted and playing this card, like, could you play this card? Yes, there is a situation. It's just very, very rare and it'd be very, very weird. All right, last one. Do you have to use aspect cards? Just like in the title, obviously you have to choose an aspect, but you can legally not include any aspect card in your deck. Obviously, I'm not talking about Spider-Woman and Adam Warlock here. Correct. It does not state you have to use at least one aspect. I've done this before with basic decks, like you might have seen on stream or whatever, where I will just use only basic cards. And people will be like, how is that legal? And I'll be like, well, because I am aggression aspect, I'm just not using any aggression cards, right? It doesn't state that you have to use a certain amount of aspect cards. It just states you have to pick an aspect. So you just pick an aspect and use 0 of its cards and then use all basics. And then you could do the same the other way with like using no basics. Like it says, like you could include basic cards, like you don't obviously have to. So yeah, you have to pick an aspect, but you don't have to play a card from the aspect. All right, that was a lot. That was a lot going on. But like I said, if you ever have any other rules, questions, or anything, feel free to put it down in the comments. You can ask it live on stream. Like I said, over on twitch.tv/G20 Woodworking. If I don't know it, I know people who are very good at rules, but generally speaking, a lot of these rules, even I have a lot of questions with them, and I struggle with them sometimes, and I have to work through them with people because sometimes just saying it out loud and working through the process like kind of really helps you out on that. So. But anyway, hopefully you enjoyed this video. I'm excited to hopefully be diving back into these Reddit replies. If you made this far, make sure to hit the like button, subscribe, all that fun stuff. I'll see you all next time.